Hello, good morning on July 3rd, 2020, to the shoreside, marine side of the office of Pride of Baltimore. We're in the lunchroom of our facility that we lease space from Port of Maryland, Port of Baltimore, over here in Clinton Street. And we've done a little bit of decorating. Not a lot. This is Peter Boudreau's art piece of the second boat, and it's got a quality of three-dimensional, which is only a taste of his talent as an artist. Behind the camera, we have Jeff Crosby, chief mate.
Good morning, everyone.
And so it's warm outside. Today is a 95-degree forecast day here in Baltimore. No wind at all, next to no wind at all. And the water's getting warm enough now that we're getting not so much of that contrast of cold air over the water being drawn to the hot air rising over land to get shoreside breezes. So it's going to be warm everywhere, very dry. Hasn't been much rain. A couple isolated thunder squalls going through. But here we are, and back with living coffee with.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. So to start off with, you've been taking some time off. I've been taking some time off. How was that? How did that go?
Well, it's been stay at home.
Sure.
It's been so happy to stay at home. I live a very short commute, easy commute, but I had no plans. Leslie and I stayed at home. And we have a little boat, so we got a little bit of sailing in. But it's I did a fair amount of emailing. There's a lot of communication with the office in the meanwhile.
Sure.
How about you, Jeff?
Oh, I didn't get very far away. I actually brought my own personal boat to our winter facility to get some work done. And I've been working on that, so more of a busman's holiday for me, which has been pretty good. What's the state that Pride is in right now?
So Jeff and I made some corrections or adjustments to the ship's preparation based on what we learned in 2018. So plenty of fans, lots of fans. We even got a donation from a neighbor that I have with one of these big house fans, huge things, like 48 inches or something like that. And so the boat has got a lot of forced air going through it. And I took a look at the bilges the other day. You've been watching them. The boat is dry down below. So the worry about getting mold seems to have gone away.
Yeah.
And while it's a warm air, okay, it's the bilges are not standing water at all, right?
Yeah, which means we can just wander away, right?
So we've had a couple of volunteers help us with regards to keeping an eye on the boat, but that was on the premise that Jeff and his boat wouldn't be here. But we've had a couple of alumni volunteers, one who lives locally, one who lives over in D.C., who helped us out with coming to write down the numbers that we want to keep a track of and to look in the bilges and see if there's anything untoward. But so far, so good, and very pleased with the outcome of the cover fan ventilating system.
Yeah, she's sitting pretty good right now. So moving on, we're coming up to 4th of July. 4th of July is right around the corner. So I wanted to spend some time and talk about what celebrations are like, what fireworks are like on board Pride. And Pride the second boat has been to a lot of really cool places during the 4th of July. In 1991, the boat was in Leningrad. In 1994, Ketchikan, Alaska. We've been everywhere from the Great Lakes. We've been in Japan. There's been a lot of times we've been waiting for the Welland Canal. What's the experience like celebrating a holiday like the 4th of July on Pride?
So the two different scenarios are we're in port, and it's an arranged port. And so we're part of a scenario that relates to fireworks celebration in port. So tall ship festivals, that sort of thing. The other is that we're between ports. And depending upon circumstances, there may be no land near us, in which case there's just nothing to see, and we're doing our own little onboard something or other. Maybe it's a cake, maybe it's a dress-up party while we're underway. But if we're near shore, maybe at anchor, maybe hove to, because the scenario is easy. We're seeing, for instance, in the lakes, you can get good visibility such that typically we're in Lake Ontario for 4th of July, if we're not in a port. And so we're getting to see fireworks from afar. And that's pretty cool as you're either at anchor or hove to, and you're just doing your onboard kind of celebration. But when you're in port, and we've been at home a few times, what years have we been in Baltimore? I think
we've been more recently 2017, 2014, 2015, 2017, 2018, and this year.
Yeah, so we've done a few special things. The bicentennial of the 1812 War.
Yeah.
That 4th of July was pretty dolled up, but because of Baltimore celebrating that, Maryland celebrating the bicentennial. But on board, we did a number of things. We were able, for the actual fireworks show, we were able to get a dock location so that we had a really good view, and it was really accessible for public to come on board, and that was spectacular. But when we're doing those kinds of things, it's work for the crew, it's work for the captain. It's still managing a platform for safety, for crowd control. It is after dark, so you have to be extra careful about that with a lot of general public on board. So, but you get to see the rig in front of the fireworks, so that could be pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's we've had a variety of circumstances that are a little bit mundane because we're separated. We're just underway, and people are on watch around. But other times it's pretty invigorating.
Sure, absolutely. In 1999, 1991, the boat was in Leningrad. You were on board for that?
Yeah.
What was that like?
The 4th of July, there were no fireworks because Leningrad's not doing fireworks.
Sure.
I don't even think we shot a cannon. I can't recall, right? It's been a while. There might be some crew members who could write in and say, yeah, we did or did not do that.
Sure.
And it's a time of the year when it's like daylight for freaking ever. It's, in fact, up there they call it, they have a phrase for it, the White Nights, I think. Anyhow, very little dark. It doesn't come in until it get kind of dark until like midnight or 1 o'clock.
Oh, wow.
So and it's very much typical summertime everywhere in the northern in the higher latitudes where people are really enjoying the weather. And so there's a park area around where we were moored, and so there's a lot of people just in the park, and all the classic stuff of younger and middle and older ages and how they interact because they're just enjoying the evening. The heat's gone away because the sun is down, but it's not gone. So there's that sort of environment. But the American Consulate General in Leningrad made arrangements with the company to use the boat. And there's a variety, there was a hosted thing where we did there. I don't know if that was on 4th of July. I think it was. And he did two things. He did one aboard the boat, and then he did one at the I guess the residence or the consulate. The one on board the boat ended in an interesting sort of way. There's a classic separation of and it's sort of militarily separated in the sense that there were guards along the waterfront right there because it was a private reception and it wasn't open. Well, the Consulate General sort of was, we got a lot of leftover food towards the end of the formalities. There might have been 100 people on deck who were the invited folks. And so he said, Captain, is it all right if I just let anybody aboard? I said, sure. So he announced to everybody that the crowd, so we wound up with doing an open house
Sure.
with
Yeah,
a
bringing
lot
the
of
public on
with the
board.
public on board, which is just not the way things are done in
Yeah.
that scenario back then with that particular country. So that's the Soviet, and so that was something he celebrated more than I did. I mean, we were just dealing with the crowd, so that was okay. Sure, let the folks come on board. And of course, economically, there was a lot of stress going on at that time. It was right on the eve of the collapse, so there were some pretty hungry people, and they were pretty polite, but they were pretty hungry. So it was an interesting thing, and the consulate general was quite proud of his ingenuity in that scenario, demonstrating sort of the American ideal of more equalness, more inclusiveness.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Do you have any other notable 4th of July experiences?
Yes. So my first year with this whole operation was with the old Pride of Baltimore.
Yeah.
1981, we took the Pride all the way into the Great Lakes. She had been up to Lake Ontario on previous occasion or two. And so by the time we got to Detroit, we were slated to go into Detroit, but not for the 4th of July. We went up to a yacht club on the north side of the city, and the crew were invited to the big fireworks show. And there's an international competition with fireworks, and it had laser lights, and they were all dolled up. But on the drive back to the ship, we're running along the road alongside the upper Detroit River into this Lake St. Clair. It's black as the ace of spades, and I'm looking over the water, and there are lights everywhere. Green ones, red ones, white ones, and they're doing this.
Yeah.
A squall had come in. I was sort of prepared for this. The squall had come through, a front actually, and it was blowing 20 plus. And a lot of the people anchored in the river to watch the fireworks show were in their classic 20-foot boats, in the sense of length, classical length, you know, ma, pa, grandpa, you know, the infant kids.
Yeah.
So I rush aboard Pride, turn on the VHF radio, and 16 is crawling with, help! Get out of my way! And you can see in the distance in Lake St. Clair all this stuff going on, rocking and roll. And it was a black field. You couldn't see a horizon.
Yeah.
And all these lights near and far going up and down. And it was an eyeball bender in the sense of trying to absorb what was being depicted, because you had vessels superimposed on each other, and it was sort of like the index card, you know, the light when you're doing your rules of the road and you do the test and you got to recognize lights for what kind of vessel.
Yeah.
It was like that in a complete collage, going up and down and round and round. And I was thrusting myself out there saying, I'm glad I'm not out there. What a nightmare. It was really quite the show. I've never forgotten it. But the contrast of the crew being given some time off, sort of like go and have drinks and watch the fireworks, and we're all tired. It was a very aggressive pace going into the lakes, and a lot of use of the boat by corporations here in Maryland and government agencies here in Maryland for that area, and so we were burning the candle at both ends, and but that scene between the fireworks was pretty cool. Tall building. We were in the Renaissance Center at the time, so everything was centered around that. So that architecture, the technology, and then you go back and you go to the lake and you watch this. All these people try to go home and survive the trip.
Yeah, it's a big small boat holiday for sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. I wanted to talk about like celebrating holidays on board. You know, so oftentimes the boat is doing something, so we can't get ashore. So what's it like spending a holiday like the 4th of July or Christmas or Thanksgiving on board, and what's different as opposed to being on land?
The strongest emotional one is the American, for those of us on an American vessel, is the American Thanksgiving one.
Mm-hmm.
So Christmas is another one, and when you're away from home for those two things, now Christmas, of course, is international. So my first experience being on a vessel as a captain with a crew, actually it wasn't my first, but one of the significant memory ones I have is the first prod in the Thanksgiving and Christmas for 1981. We were down in Beckwith. We were doing a big deck recaulk job. We had hired a number of Beckwians who had also helped build the boat and caulk the boat, which is cool. So they come back to the boat, and we were bow in to the beach with the head rig into the trees with a stern anchor, and we had been completing the project towards Christmas. The idea was to leave right after Christmas and start to work our way towards a date obligation in Puerto Rico after the turn of the year. So how do you make that not just one person's job?
Sure.
The cook.
Yeah.
The crew. And so I had a conversation with the office. They sent a number of things down and care package stuff. And then we held that in the reserve. And then I worked out an arrangement with the crew with the rationale that it shouldn't just be one person doing it all. So let's do the Secret Santa thing. And then, I mean, I was asking for ideas, but I also made the recommendation that maybe there's some special dishes. And so there was an effort to do that. And it brought it in as a family celebration rather than the crew just being given something special. So we've practiced that numerous times whenever we've been away, particularly for Thanksgiving. We're not often away for Christmas. Since we've been laying the boat up every winter, we're usually here.
Sure.
But Thanksgiving is a time when we might still be at work. And so that's a very special thing. We've been down in Virginia at the end of a dry dock where, again, we're trying to accommodate people who want to go home, but the transition of time, we can't lose them for a 2-day travel, have a day there, 5 days of travel. They can't afford it all quite often, so you need to try to make it special. So we try to do an engaging event. But if we're here, we also try to allow for the fact that some people have friends in the area or might even be from Maryland. And so we do an early meal. We do it kind of closer to early afternoon, be done by 2 or 3, so that if they want to go for a second Thanksgiving and they can get there, and of course the next day is a work day. So there was a time when we were actually open to the general public over the Thanksgiving weekend. So it'd be in the Inner Harbor. So there was one particularly complex weekend where we did the Thanksgiving thing aboard the ship, and we had crew change. Some went home to New York and came back again. And we had a sort of like a 3-day weekend where we weren't open to Thanksgiving, but then there's Black Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and there was a shift. But so the business of making it special with an inclusiveness rather than saying, okay, cook, what are you going to do for this holiday?
Yeah.
And Thanksgiving's been interesting with the business of different menu plans and trying to get them to actually do it rather than request it. Now, we happen to have a rebellious cook right now.
Yeah.
He's long in the tooth, and he doesn't want anybody in his galley. So he
don't touch my stuff.
He turns this on its head, and he says, tell me what you want. I'll make it.
Yeah.
And it's not hard that way. I think there's some people who can pre-make things the day before, but yeah, so anyway, the business of trying to not have it become institutional in one sense and have it a sense of responsibility and welcome and expectation. We're a family, and we're a family with these particular cultural traditions coming from home, but we're either away from home or we're trapped in a scenario of work that doesn't allow for getting away for 2-3 days because we still got work to do. So it's a little bit of a mental trick at first, but after a while we develop some kind of a pattern, and it adjusts sometimes. there's some games that we do on board. There's the the turkey game?
The hand turkeys?
Yeah, the hand turkey,
Yeah.
draw and do decorations and have activities. Sometimes we get a TV on board with a signal and you can watch them parade
Yeah, the
on
Macy's
TV.
Day.
Yeah, while the final the things are being done. I think last Thanksgiving, did you cook the turkey?
I did, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
You threw Phil out, didn't you?
I did.
Don't darken this doorway.
You know, the cook needs a break sometimes too.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. So you know, holidays are oftentimes just us as a crew family, so to speak, because the boat is working. You know, it's busy. What are some other cool celebrations that the boat has been a part of? You know, there's festival years. There's also the bicentennial.
Well, let's see. Okay, well 1992 was a busy festival year with Tall Ships Challenge arrangements because we had an international fleet coming across.
Yeah.
So a huge fleet down in Puerto Rico coming across in a race from Europe, and then a cruise up from Puerto Rico to New York for the big 4th of July thing up the Hudson River, followed by another big event in Boston. So we had a period of time where, because of that 500 years recognition coming to the North American continent, so there was quite a lot of activity. I mean, it's so busy, your mind is a blur because you're on this treadmill, got to get things done. I had a couple of interesting reflections. There was a time when I was in Puerto Rico and I had a little bit of time off, and I went way up to a restaurant, a small restaurant that had a cafe arrangement looking out over the Atlantic to the north. And I sat down, and a gentleman came up and said, "Aren't you the captain of the Pride of Baltimore?" Turns out to be the captain of the Gorsch Fock. So we wound up chatting for a while, and he said, "You guys really did a heck of a job sailing into Puerto Rico because it was blowing out of the classic trade wind situation, and we were carrying the topsail, so it's blowing 15, 18 knots, and so we're doing the full 4 lowers and the square topsail, and we're tacking into Puerto Rico all the way up to just off the dock. And I mean, you reach in close hauled on the actual entry, but then you tack over across the harbor to the east." And he was watching this whole thing. So we wound up having a good conversation about other things maritime. He talked about how he was disappointed with the design work of what's called the H pattern, where all the yards are equal length on square sails, and they don't lower and raise the yards, they keep them fixed. He says they're powerful and they're fast, but he really doesn't like them. Whereas there's the more tapered arrangement, such as the Gorsch Fock is a classic. One of the first Gorsch, the Eagle is an ex-Gorsch Fock vessel. No, she ex-Gorsch? No, she isn't. She's a different name. But anyhow, same concept of a tapered set of yards coming in as you go up and up and up and up.
Yeah.
So we had the other thing that was interesting was we had this date arrangement with a boomer submarine.
Oh, cool.
So this is all hush, 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 hush. It's okay now. It's been so long.
It's been a while.
So the USS Maryland was one of the biggest of the boomers' recent design, and so they had been envious of the fact that we'd had a rendezvous with the USS Baltimore, which is an attack sub. So on the way out in 1985 to Europe, Pride rendezvoused down off of the entrance to the harbor of Norfolk. And there's an aerial photograph. A helicopter flew over us, and there's the sub going outbound, and we're sailing alongside.
Oh,
so they
cool.
wanted to do a similar thing. The question was, how do you arrange this? Because you can't tell anybody where the sub is.
Right.
Now, we can tell everybody where we are, but how do we communicate that to the sub? And so we had this arrangement whereby, because we're coming from Puerto Rico to head to New York, I could give a window of time. I said, okay, it turns out that we're on a trip from somewhere in the East Coast to somewhere else in the East Coast, but it's going to be a slow trip because we're going to do a lot of training. And we have this big zone of which we stay inside, but it's big enough to do a lot of stuff in. So if you guys think you're going to be passing this 300-mile area within this, say, day or two period of time, a fixed day or two period of time, maybe we can find you. So we happen to be motoring up towards Hatteras, and we hadn't quite reached the Gulf Stream yet, and it was dead calm out in the southern part of the Western Atlantic. And so over the stern, we see this shape of a con tower on a hull form. So we realized they had found us. They were very careful to say, if you're sailing, have the generator on, because we might not be able to find you otherwise, right, if we're underwater. But they could hear our twin engines going like this. So anyway, they're coming up from behind. So we set sail because, as it turns out, just coincidentally, we start to get a breeze out of the east. So we set the four lowers on square top, and we're sailing along 4 or 5 knots. They come alongside, actually a little faster, 6 knots. And they come alongside and are on the windward side. And they're huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not looking just up at the conning tower people. I'm looking up at the top of the deck of where the lift goes for the missiles. So, and it's almost a 700-foot thing.
Wow.
We're only 157, so outside the rig. So this thing is gigantic by comparison. But we're sailing along, and and they have a few people in the conning tower. You can't put everybody up there. And so we're looking at them, they're looking at us. So we warned them, because we didn't want to cause any trouble, that we're going to give them a salute with a cannon. So we shoot to windward a couple cannons. Now the conning tower is up near the head rig rather than back aft, and they're probably 150 feet, 200 feet off to the side.
Sure.
Probably more like 100, 150 feet. So we're steadily moving along like this, and so we shoot the cannons. And they said, a little while later in the radio, said, okay, oh, there's a P-3 Orion, a 4-engine plane with only 3 engines running, and it's doing lazy 8s all around us.
Sure.
And so we're seeing that happen too. So anyway, they get on the radio and say, okay, we're going to return the favor. And I'm thinking, what are they going to do?
With what?
Well, meanwhile, the wind is dying down, and we're going slow, but they're keeping steady pace, so the length of the hull is getting forward. So by the time they do whatever they're doing, their stern steering gear and plane gear is alongside us. Mm-hmm. And the conning tower is pretty far forward. And I hear this pneumatic sound. And what's that? Somebody says, look up! And they'd shot parachute flares.
Oh, cool.
White ones.
Yeah.
But they were to windward.
Oh, no.
So we all were sitting there, standing there, going in our minds, if not on our faces, thinking that we're going to have magnesium flares land in the rig.
Yeah.
So I actually went to the start the engines thinking that I could accelerate out or slow down or do something, but the altitude was so high that they just, and of course being parachute flares, they drifted off. But that moment, even they had this gulp as they realized, we're alongside, this will be okay. No, we're not along. We surged ahead, and the pneumatic location of these flares is back in the stern of the submarine, which is now alongside Pride, and they're to windward 100, 200 feet. So we had this feeling that it was all going to land on the ship. Later on, 6 or 8 months later, we were allowed to see the photographs because they got declassified, and the captain, a different captain, because they have a blue and gold team scenario, he said, yeah, we don't want to talk about that. The whole thought that the Navy would be responsible for losing the Pride of Baltimore II in an at-sea with the P-3 Orion flying around, recording everything. So we had an interesting other occasion just ahead of that. We left Puerto Rico, the big parade coming out of Puerto Rico. All the ships left the harbor, went well to the east, and then sailed on a stream by Puerto Rico with a fair wind. It's blowing 15, 18 knots, 18, 20 knots, so it's a good fair breeze. And then they sheer to the right and head northwest. They head for New York. And we're on our way. And it's at late afternoon, and there's just the horizon is full of these traditional rigs, and modern rigs, all up and down, because everybody's included in these gatherings. And I get this radio call, U.S. Naval Unit calling Pride of Baltimore, and so U.S. Naval Unit, we're looking around, can't see a thing.
Yeah.
So I answer back. It says, "Hey, Jan, this is," and I can't think of his name, so I'm still not following it.
Yeah.
But it takes a moment to realize that it's the USS Baltimore on a route down into the Caribbean, just coincidentally passing by underwater with the periscope up, watching what's going on, spots us and says hello because they can put the radio antenna up, but they can't declare who they are for obvious reasons that we all know these modern days. So I had this radio conversation with the USS Baltimore. A few days later, we have this meet up with the P-3 Orion with the USS Maryland. It's sort of like, you can't make this stuff up. It's just an adventurous life with the Pride as her mission and her iconic appearance and her performance. And over the decades, not just years, decades of getting around, paying a courtesy call to others, saying, "Hey, we'd like to introduce ourselves and share with you what we think is pretty cool." And she carries, both boats carry it off so very well. This legacy of yeah, look at that, that's the Pride of Baltimore. It's pretty cool. You get it out at sea as well.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on our time here. So one last kind of question. The bicentennial of the 1812 war. The boat was pretty active during those years, and I would imagine there were a lot of fireworks. What was that like?
Wow. For us, Jamie Trost and I were the two captains, and we were dividing things up almost every other day because the boat was on such a tight schedule. We were doing underway sails 2 hours at a time pretty frequently. We were doing deck tours in between time. There was also some after dark stuff.
Sure.
Jamie led up this, whereby we had a historian come aboard and share about that night of the bombardment and how the British, and we maneuvered around Fort McHenry with the Pride while this fellow was talking about how the British tried to do a cutting out routine around the south side, backside of Fort McHenry, and how the Americans had anticipated that possibility and had a nest of cannon locations along that south side there, which is North Locust Point, as we talk about it now, and was able to repel that group. And so we were just plain busy, and it's all more a blur. The Inner Harbor was
move the boat, be here, boom, move the boat, be here, boom,
there were a number of vessels. We had both Navy vessels as well, international Navy vessels as well. Gray boats, as the term has been kicked around just as a reference, as well as tall ships showing up, American schooners, foreign square riggers were around. So the harbor was full of masts as well as other structures, and it's more a blur. The security side of it was interesting. Leslie and I got a chance to go visit one of the military vessels. The air display. See, one of the things that was going on, I just realized that the air display, the Blue Angels, had more than one day of activity, and there were blockout zones because as they fly low, you can't have anybody underneath. So there were blockout zones that took up quite a bit of the Patapsco between Fort McHenry and south of Fort McHenry in the main branch, and going out towards Seagirt and towards Dundalk. And so it was one time we went out to Anchor to watch that, I think more than once, or maybe we stayed underway, but stayed outside of the zone. So we were actually over, just anchored outside of here, but north of Fort McHenry, to watch the planes fly by. Leslie and I got on a gray ship over on South Locust Point, and we were on a big, flat, sort of helicopter deck, and we could watch some flybys like that. But it's a blur. It's just when something like that big. So it's in 1976 when I was mate aboard the Brilliant, New York and Boston. It's exhausting. There's so many people you want to see, and so many boats you want to look at, and then you've got your own responsibilities, and then there's the nightlife. Oh my goodness, the nightlife, and then and so you're just burning the candle at both ends, and it becomes a blur. 1992 up in Boston we were doing day sales in Boston as well as dockside receptions as well as general public stuff, and it was just. And of course, around 4th of July or or just plain fireworks because it's the festival. Sometimes we'll have that situation. We'll get a charter. We've had a charter where we want to be out for the fireworks. I actually hate that.
Yeah, it's my
unless we're at Anchor, we're okay. But if they're saying we want to go sailing around, I hate that because it's a matter of navigation. It's a matter of sharing the view. There's blocking going on because you're sailing, because they don't just the imagination overpowers the reality, and the reality is you got to put the sails up to go sailing, so that blocks the fireworks. So the imagination, trying to manage the imagination and deliver when it's impossible to say we're not doing that because it's seen as capricious. Yeah. So you go out anyway and you do it. We had an interesting sail in Boston during one of those occasions in '92 where I was so cross about this business that we just set the topsail. We had a wind angle that was just right in the harbor of Boston. We went from Charlestown, near where the the Constitution is, and we were able to set the topsail, and it was a southwest breeze, and we starboard tacked around. We left the midships awning up because it had been up. It was a hot day, so we left it up for the sail, and we just went with the one sail. We went in a counterclockwise motion. We had to do it ahead of the fireworks because they wouldn't let anybody maneuver during the fireworks, so they were setting the barge in place. So, but also everybody else was out there dropping their anchor. Yeah. So we're already getting into dark, and we're doing this, and so anyway, it was me just indulging in a challenge that took me away from my anger about the situation, and it kept it easy for the crew because it was just the one sail. We didn't have to take the awning down, didn't have to set the other sails up, and we sailed at 3-4 knots all the way around and back up to where we moored up in Constitution. So festivals are fun, but they're also a lot of work. Yeah, a lot of work.
Yeah, people come down to see the experience. It's a lot different being part of the experience. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's all we have for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. And thank you if you donated. That helps keep these going. And please join us next week, same time, 8:30 on Friday. And Captain Miles, do you have any parting words for us?
Stay diligent, everybody. Stay diligent.